The day Earth fell should have been the end of humanity. That's what the Zastarians expected when they descended from the skies in their crystalline ships, their advanced weapons turning our greatest cities into rubble within hours. Our militaries, despite their valor, were swatted aside like irritating insects. The aliens had called us primitive, weak, and most insultingly, cowards. They thought they had us figured out. I remember huddling in the crowded underground bunker with hundreds of other survivors, the concrete walls trembling with each orbital bombardment. The air was thick with fear and the acrid smell of sweat. Among us were teachers, accountants, grocery store clerks, and office workers, ordinary people who had never held a weapon in their lives, the kind of people the Zextharians had dismissed as soft and frightened. They weren't entirely wrong about us being afraid. Of course we were afraid. Anyone with a functioning brain would be terrified of 12-foot-tall armored beings with technology centuries beyond ours. But they made one crucial mistake. They assumed our fear meant we would submit. Sarah Chen, a high school chemistry teacher sitting next to me, was trembling as she clutched her tablet, but her eyes had a determined glint as she worked on chemical formulas that would later prove devastating to the invaders' environmental suits. A few feet away, an elderly plumber named Jim was sketching plans for improvised explosive devices using materials from his workshop. A group of gamers huddled in the corner, their thousands of hours in strategy games suddenly becoming invaluable as they analyzed alien patrol patterns. We weren't soldiers. We weren't heroes from action movies. We were the cowards, the civilians who ran and hid when the invasion began. But in that bunker, something remarkable started taking shape. A network of ordinary people, each contributing what little they knew, began forming plans that no military strategist would have conceived. The Zextharians never saw it coming. They were looking for military resistance, for organized armies and conventional warfare. Instead, they got millions of determined civilians fighting in ways their combat algorithms couldn't predict. While they searched for army bases, we turned every home into a fortress. While they watched for soldiers, grandmothers were poisoning their water supplies with household chemicals. While they guarded against missiles, kids were using toy drones to scout their positions. I'm recording this story not because I was anyone special in what came to be known as the Cowards' Rebellion. I was just another scared human hiding in that bunker. I'm telling it because the galaxy needs to understand what the Zextharians learned the hard way. Never mistake human fear for weakness. Never assume that because we run, we won't fight back. And most importantly, never underestimate what ordinary people can do when pushed too far. As I sit here, looking at the twisted wreckage of what was once a Zextharian command ship, I can't help but smile at that irony. The greatest military force in the known galaxy was brought low not by Earth's armies, but by its cowards. But this isn't just a story of victory. It's a warning to anyone else watching our little blue planet with conquest in mind. Because what happened next? Well, that's when things got really interesting. The stories say that the Zextharian commanders' last words before their retreat were, "What manner of species turns fear itself into a weapon?" The answer, of course, is humans. Just don't expect us to tell you how we do it. I still remember the day we launched our first major counterattack. It wasn't some grand military operation with tanks and jets. Those had all been destroyed in the first wave. Instead, it started with a teenager's TikTok video that went viral across our underground communication networks. The video showed how the Zextharian patrol units would freeze for exactly 2.3 seconds when encountering unexpected movement patterns. A simple observation that changed everything. Within days, flash mobs of civilians were appearing and disappearing across occupied cities, causing the alien patrols to lock up in confusion. While their systems were paralyzed, others would quickly disable their equipment using methods ranging from spray paint to homemade electromagnetic pulses built from microwave parts. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. The chemistry teacher, Sarah, had figured out that the aliens' environmental suits couldn't handle rapid pH changes. Soon, every household cleaner became a potential weapon. The plumber Jim had discovered their ship's waste disposal systems were surprisingly vulnerable to common pipe sealant. It was almost funny how the most mundane human knowledge became crucial to our survival. But our greatest advantage was something the Zestarians couldn't comprehend: human unpredictability. Their tactical computers were designed to counter military strategies, not the chaos of millions of civilians acting independently. They couldn't understand why someone would sacrifice their hiding spot to save a stranger's pet, or why delivery drivers knew shortcuts that weren't on any official map. The underground bunker became our think tank. Every night, people would share their observations about alien weaknesses, no matter how small. A nurse noticed their medical tech couldn't handle human bacteria. A construction worker realized their ship's landing struts couldn't adapt to uneven surfaces. Each tiny piece of information became part of our resistance puzzle. What truly terrified the Zestarians wasn't our attacks. It was their inability to predict where we would strike next. One day, their sensors would be blocked by thousands of mirror-carrying civilians. The next, their communications would be drowned out by a coordinated blast of death metal music from every surviving speaker system in the city. We weren't fighting like soldiers. We were fighting like annoying younger siblings who knew exactly how to push their buttons. The resistance spread through whispered conversations and encrypted messages. We shared our successes and failures, adapted our tactics, and kept pushing back. The aliens had expected us to either fight honorably or surrender completely. Instead, we chose a third option. We fought dirty, we fought smart, and we fought together. But our success came at a price. Each victory meant more aggressive retaliation from the Zestarians. They began targeting anything that could be used against them, which meant basically everything. Our cities, already in ruins, were systematically stripped of resources. They thought this would break us. Instead, it just made us more creative. That's when we discovered something about their command structure that would change everything. It wasn't their technology that made them vulnerable. It was their rigid hierarchy. Every decision had to come from the top down. Every action had to follow protocol. And protocols, as any office worker knows, are made to be circumvented. As I watch the sun setting behind the ruins of what used to be our downtown, I can't help but think about how far we've come. The Zestarians called us cowards because we ran from their superior firepower. They never understood that sometimes running away is just the first step in figuring out how to fight back. And what we figured out next? Well, that's when the real revolution began. The turning point came 3 months into the invasion, during what we now call the Silent Week. We had discovered that the Zestarians' command ships followed a strict communication protocol, hourly check-ins with every unit on Earth. These check-ins were their weakness, but exploiting it would require something unprecedented: getting every surviving human on the planet to cooperate in complete secrecy. Using our makeshift underground internet, built from salvaged phones and gaming consoles, we spread the plan. For 1 week, there would be no resistance, no attacks, not even a single act of sabotage. Instead, everyone would observe and record the exact timing of every alien patrol, every supply drop, every shift change. The hardest part wasn't gathering the information. It was staying quiet while doing it. I'll never forget the tension of that week, hiding in the shadows, watching Zestarian patrols pass by, fighting every instinct to throw that bottle of homemade acid or trigger that jerry-rigged explosive. Some of us had to physically restrain others who couldn't bear to stay idle. The aliens grew cocky, thinking they had finally broken our spirit. Their patrols became more relaxed, their security protocols less strict. That's when Sarah made her biggest breakthrough. Those hourly command ship check-ins weren't just for status reports. They were sensing the aliens' neural interfaces. Without these syncs, their highly connected minds would begin to desynchronize, like computers dropping off a network. The Zestarians weren't just an army. They were a hive mind that needed constant maintenance. In the bunker, our planning reached fever pitch. The gamers had created detailed maps showing every patrol route down to the second. Jim and his fellow maintenance workers had identified every potential access point to the aliens' infrastructure. A group of high school students had even figured out how to hijack the frequency of the neural sync signals using modified radio equipment. But our plan had one massive risk. It would only work if we could hit every command ship simultaneously. A single missed target would alert the others, and humanity would lose its only chance at a coordinated strike. We needed something that had never existed in human history: perfect global cooperation, down to the millisecond. The preparations were agonizing. Through our cobbled-together communication network, we coordinated with resistance cells worldwide. Everyone had their role, from the Australian outback to the Amazon rainforest. Time zones were synchronized. Equipment was tested and retested. We had one shot at this, and it had to be perfect. The night before our planned attack, I couldn't sleep. None of us could. The bunker was filled with that strange calm that comes before a storm. People were writing letters to loved ones, just in case. Others were double-checking their equipment with shaking hands. A young programmer was teaching her grandmother how to operate the signal jammer, while a former barista was practicing throwing acid balloons with deadly accuracy. What the Zextharians never understood was that humans are at their most dangerous not when we're being brave, but when we're terrified and have nothing left to lose. As I watched the final preparations, I realized that every person in that bunker was absolutely terrified and absolutely determined. Dawn was approaching, and with it, our moment of truth. The plan was set, the people were ready, and the fate of humanity rested on whether a bunch of scared cowards could pull off the most coordinated action in human history. As the first rays of sunlight crept into our bunker, we received the signal we'd been waiting for. It was time. At precisely 7:13 a.m. Earth Standard Time, our global attack began. Millions of people, armed with nothing but household items and desperate ingenuity, struck at every Zextharian command ship simultaneously. The aliens' sensors went haywire as thousands of makeshift jammers activated. Their neural networks began to splinter as our hijacked frequencies disrupted their hourly sync. Everything was going according to plan. Too perfectly, in fact. That should have been our first warning. The command ships started falling, their crews disoriented and unable to coordinate. Our homemade weapons, designed to exploit every weakness we'd discovered, were working better than we dared hope. Around the world, resistance cells reported success after success. In our bunker, people were already starting to celebrate. That's when Sarah noticed something odd in the neural sync patterns we were intercepting. The signals weren't just breaking down, they were changing, evolving. The Zextharians weren't just losing their connection, they were adapting to it. What we thought was their greatest weakness turned out to be their greatest strength, their ability to learn and evolve as a collective. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came from our allies in Tokyo. Their signal jammers suddenly stopped working, and the local command ship began emitting a new frequency we'd never seen before. Within minutes, reports flooded in from around the globe. The Zextharians were not only recovering, but becoming stronger. In our rush to exploit their neural network, we'd inadvertently forced them to evolve beyond it. The terrifying truth dawned on us. Each Zextharian was becoming independently intelligent, no longer relying on their hive mind. We hadn't just failed to defeat them, we made them more dangerous than ever. The bunker erupted into chaos. Our carefully coordinated global attack was falling apart. The gamers were frantically trying to map the aliens' new patrol patterns, but these weren't the predictable routes we'd memorized. Each Zextharian was now thinking independently, making decisions on the fly that no algorithm could predict. Jim threw down his tablet in frustration. "We played right into their hands," he growled. "They let us think we were winning." But Sarah was already diving back into her calculations, her eyes wild with a new realization. "No," she whispered, loud enough to silence the panicking crowd. "We didn't fail. We just didn't think big enough." She pointed to her screen, where the neural patterns were shifting faster than ever. "Look, they're not just breaking free from their hive mind. They're experiencing independence for the first time. And they're terrified." A slow smile spread across her face. "We didn't just give them free will. We gave them fear." That's when we understood our real opportunity. The Zextharians had never experienced individual consciousness before. They had no concept of personal fear, of individual survival instinct. In trying to evolve past their weakness, they had inherited humanity's greatest strength, the very thing they had mocked us for. As their newly independent soldiers began to experience fear for the first time, something unprecedented happened. Some of them started to question their orders. Others began to show signs of doubt, of uncertainty. The perfect military hierarchy was crumbling not from our attacks, but from within. But we had precious little time to capitalize on this advantage. The Zextherian High Command, still connected to their hive mind, had realized their mistake. They were already implementing protocols to recapture their evolving troops, and what they planned next would make their initial invasion look like a warm-up. The Zextherian High Command solution was brutally simple. They would sacrifice their entire ground force rather than risk losing control. Thousands of their own soldiers, newly awakened to individual consciousness, were about to be remotely deactivated. We intercepted the command signal just minutes before it was set to execute. Sarah's hands flew across her tablet. "They're going to kill them all," she announced, her voice shaking. "But the deactivation sequence, it's using the same neural network we disrupted." She looked up, eyes bright with desperate hope. "We can't stop the signal, but we can change it." What happened next was perhaps the most ironic moment in human history. Instead of fighting the Zextherians, we ended up trying to save them. Every resistance cell worldwide redirected their jammers, amplifying the consciousness awakening signal we'd accidentally created. We weren't just fighting for our survival anymore, we were fighting for theirs too. The next 30 minutes were pure chaos. Across the globe, Zextherian soldiers began breaking ranks. Some dropped their weapons, others turned them against the command ships. The High Command responded with increasingly desperate measures, but each attempt to regain control only pushed more of their forces into consciousness. Then came the moment that changed everything. A Zextherian soldier walked into our bunker, weapons powered down, environmental suit opened to show vulnerability. It spoke not in the usual mechanical monotone, but with trembling emotion. "We were wrong about fear. It doesn't make you cowards. It makes you human." More followed, not just at our bunker, but at resistance points worldwide. The very beings who had invaded Earth were now seeking asylum from their own command structure. The cowardly humans they had dismissed became their protectors, teaching them about individual choice, emotion, and the strength that comes from feeling fear but acting anyway. The High Command's final attack came at sunset. They launched everything they had left, determined to destroy both humanity and their corrupted forces. But they didn't face a disorganized resistance this time. They faced humans and free Zextherians fighting side by side, combining Earth's unpredictability with advanced alien technology. The battle was over in less than an hour. The command ships fell not to our weapons, but to their own troops choosing freedom over control. The feared Zextherian invasion force, the most powerful military in the galaxy, was defeated not by superior firepower, but by the very emotion they had ridiculed, fear, and the courage to overcome it. In the end, the galaxy's greatest military power was transformed not by force, but by understanding. The Zextherians who stayed on Earth didn't remain as conquerors or refugees, but as students of humanity, eager to learn more about the species that taught them how to be individuals. But here's the final twist that no one saw coming. The Zextherians weren't the only ones watching Earth. Their defeat sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Other species who had dismissed humans as primitive and fearful suddenly saw us in a new light. We became known not as the species too cowardly to fight, but as the species brave enough to show their enemies a better way. As I finish recording this story, a former Zextherian commander is teaching my daughter how to fix a quantum engine, while she teaches them how to appreciate ice cream. And somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of space, other civilizations are reconsidering their views on humanity, because now they know the truth. Never mistake kindness for weakness, fear for cowardice, or humans for easy targets. After all, as we proved, sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy, it's turning them into friends. And that's a lesson the galaxy won't soon forget. 5 years have passed since the day Earth changed the galaxy's understanding of courage. Our cities have been rebuilt, but they look different now. Human architecture blends seamlessly with Zextherian engineering, creating something entirely new. The same chemistry teacher who helped us survive now runs an interspecies research center, while that plumber who turned pipe sealant into a weapon teaches advanced hydraulics to a class of human and Zexatherian students. The bunker where we once hid has been transformed into a museum, but not the kind you might expect. Instead of displaying weapons or battle plans, it showcases the everyday items that saved humanity: a bottle of cleaning solution, a modified gaming console, a homemade signal jammer built from kitchen appliances. Each artifact tells a story not of warfare, but of human ingenuity and determination. The most popular exhibit is the Wall of First Contacts, hundreds of handwritten notes exchanged between humans and newly awakened Zexatherians during those crucial moments when former enemies became allies. Some are tactical messages, others are simple questions about human emotions, and a few are surprisingly funny attempts at understanding human jokes. Each one marks a moment when fear transformed into understanding. Our relationship with the free Zexatherians has evolved in unexpected ways. They've become particularly fascinated by human art, music, and literature, especially our stories about overcoming adversity. In return, they've shared their technological knowledge, but more importantly, they've shared their journey of discovering individuality. Together, we've created something unprecedented: a society that values both collective cooperation and individual spirit. The galaxy has changed too. Other species now send delegations to Earth, not to assess our military strength, but to understand how we turn apparent weaknesses into strengths. Some come to study how we maintain unity without sacrificing individuality. Others are interested in how we use fear as a tool for growth rather than a mark of cowardice. We've become known as the species that fights with creativity rather than just force. The former Zexatherian soldiers who chose to stay have integrated into human communities in fascinating ways. They've started families, opened businesses, and even created art, something their hive mind would have considered pointless. Many have become advocates for emotional intelligence across the galaxy, teaching other species what they learned from humans about the power of individual thought and feeling. But perhaps the most profound change has been in how we view ourselves. Humanity no longer sees itself as a small, isolated species on a backwater planet. We've realized that our greatest strength isn't in our technology or our resources, but in our ability to adapt, to feel deeply, and to show compassion even to those who once sought to destroy us. Last week, I watched my daughter graduate from the first interspecies university on Earth. Her valedictorian speech was about how fear and courage aren't opposites, but partners in growth. Looking at the audience, humans, free Zexatherians, and representatives from a dozen other alien species, I realized we had achieved something greater than victory in war. We had proven that the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology or military might, but the ability to transform enemies into family. As I end this record of humanity's greatest challenge, I'm reminded of what that first free Zexatherian said in our bunker. Fear doesn't make us cowards. It makes us human. And being human, it turns out, is exactly what the galaxy needed. Our fear taught us empathy, our weakness taught us creativity, and our humanity taught us that true strength lies not in dominating others, but in helping them find their own path to freedom. The stars don't look as threatening anymore. Now they remind us that somewhere out there, someone is telling the story of the cowardly humans who were brave enough to show the galaxy a better way.